The starship that refused to fly until a human sat in the pilot's chair. The docking bay had been sealed for so long that most people thought of it as part of the station's outer wall, rather than a place that could still be opened. Layers of warning signs in dozens of languages covered the entrance. Some were faded, some were scratched out. All of them said the same thing in different ways. Do not enter, do not touch, do not attempt activation. Inside rested the starship. It was older than the Galactic Union itself, older than many of the species that now ruled it. No one knew who had built it. No one knew why it had been left behind. What everyone knew was that it did not work, or rather, it refused to work. The ship had been studied for generations. The brightest minds had scanned it, mapped it, and argued over it. Engineers had connected power lines. Scientists had tried to wake its systems. Military commanders had hoped it might become a weapon. Every attempt followed the same pattern. The ship accepted power, ran silent internal checks, then shut itself down as if offended by the attempt. Eventually, the Union stopped trying. The dock became a museum piece, then a restricted zone, and finally a forgotten space used only for storage records and low-priority maintenance routes. It was safe to leave it alone. The ship had proven that much. When humanity joined the Galactic Union, they were told about the ship as part of a long list of things they were not to interfere with. Humans were new, inexperienced, and still learning how to exist among older civilizations. They were welcomed, but watched closely. Mistakes were expected. Jack did not know much about the ship when he was assigned to the docking bay. He was a junior systems engineer, the kind who fixed power relays and cleaned access corridors that no one else wanted to walk through. His assignment was simple. Run a diagnostic on the environmental controls in the old dock and make sure nothing was leaking into the station. He did not expect the bay doors to open. When they did, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The dock's swallowed sound. Even the hum of the station seemed weaker there, as if the space itself was listening. The ship rested in the center, dark and still, its surface smooth but marked by time. It did not look broken. It looked patient. Jack felt uneasy, though he could not say why. He reminded himself that it was just a machine, a very old one but still metal and circuitry. He followed procedure, scanning the air, checking seals, and logging data into his wrist console. The cockpit hatch was open. That surprised him. According to station records, the ship was fully sealed. He stood at the base of the access ramp and stared up at the opening. A part of him told him to report it and leave. Another part, quieter but stronger, told him to look. Curiosity had always been his weakness. He climbed the ramp slowly, half expecting alarms to sound. Nothing happened. The interior lights flickered on as he crossed the threshold, responding to his presence as if it had been waiting. The cockpit was unlike anything he had seen. There were no familiar screens or controls. Instead, the space curved around a single chair at the center. The chair faced forward toward a wide viewport that looked out into the dock. It was not sized for any known species, but it was not wrong for a human either. It looked comfortable, inviting. Jack laughed nervously. This was ridiculous. He was a maintenance tech, not a pilot. Still, the chair seemed to pull at him, not physically, but in a way that made ignoring it feel harder with every step. He checked his console again. No warnings. No active systems, just the same dead readings everyone else had seen for centuries. He sat down. The change was instant. Light flooded the cockpit, soft at first, then brighter. Symbols appeared in the air, shifting and rearranging themselves. The floor vibrated beneath his boots. Somewhere deep within the ship, something massive moved. Jack jumped to his feet, heart pounding. "Nope," he said out loud, because saying it made him feel braver. He turned toward the hatch. The cockpit doors closed, not violently. Not quickly, they slid shut with calm certainty, as if the ship were simply completing a long-delayed step. "Okay," Jack said, breathing fast. "Okay, that's fine, I'll just sit back down." The chair adjusted itself as he did, molding to his shape. The symbols in the air shifted again, forming patterns he somehow understood without knowing how. He realized with growing disbelief that the ship was running diagnostics. Real ones, not surface checks, but deep system evaluations. The engines began to warm. Across the station, alarms went off. Security teams flooded the corridors leading to the docking bay. Scientists pulled up readings they had not seen before. Power levels spiked beyond anything the ancient ship had ever shown. Inside the cockpit, Jack felt strangely calm. The fear was still there, but it sat behind something else. A sense of connection. The ship was not talking to him in words, but he felt its attention, its awareness. When he tried to stand again, the chair held him in place. "Hey," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I didn't mean to break anything." The ship did not shut down. Instead, the viewport changed. Images flowed across it, not as video, but as impressions, broken fleets, rigid formations shattered by chaos, perfect plans failing because reality refused to follow them. Over and over, species that relied on prediction and control were overwhelmed by the unexpected. Jack swallowed. He did not fully understand what he was seeing, but he understood enough. The ship had been built for something different. Security reached the dock and surrounded the ship. Orders were shouted. Demands were made. Jack heard them faintly through the hull as if from underwater. The ship did not respond to them. It responded to him. A simple prompt formed in the air before his eyes. Not words exactly, but a question he felt more than read. "Are you willing to act without certainty?" Jack thought about his life, about choosing engineering because it felt safe, about avoiding risks that might lead to failure, about how he had sat in this chair without permission, driven by nothing but curiosity. "I guess," he said quietly, "I already did." The engine stabilized. The ship's power signature settled into a steady rhythm, strong and controlled. The station's systems adjusted automatically, as if recognizing that resistance was useless. Union officials stared at their displays in silence. For the first time in recorded history, the ancient Starship was awake. And it would not fly without a human in the pilot's chair. The station did not sleep after the Starship woke. Lights stayed bright, corridors filled with hurried footsteps. Messages crossed the Union network faster than official channels could track. Everyone wanted answers, and no one had them. Inside the cockpit, Jack remained seated. The chair still held him gently, not like a restraint, but like a reminder. He could move his arms and legs, but whenever he tried to stand, the chair resisted just enough to make the point clear. The ship wanted him there. Outside, a ring of security vessels formed around the dock. Their weapons stayed powered down, but targeting systems followed every flicker of energy from the ancient hull. Commanders argued over what to do next. Some demanded immediate shutdown. Others feared that even trying would provoke a reaction they could not control. Jack felt the arguments more than he heard them. The ship fed him fragments of sound, filtered and softened. It did not want panic. It wanted focus. A group of Union scientists finally gained permission to speak to him through a narrow communication channel. Their faces appeared as small projections near the viewport. Most of them were not human. Their expressions ranged from awe to fear. "You must disengage and exit the vessel," one of them said, speaking slowly as if Jack might not understand. "This ship is not safe." Jack rubbed his palms against his pants. "I don't think it wants me to leave." "That is not relevant," another voice snapped. "No species has ever been accepted by that machine. Humans have been members of the Union for less than a generation. There is no logical explanation for this." Jack looked at the symbols drifting around him. They shifted slightly, responding to his attention. "Maybe logic isn't what it's using." The line went quiet. Behind the calm surface, the Union was cracking. Accusations spread quickly. Some claimed humanity had tampered with the ship long before joining the Union. Others suggested the ship was malfunctioning and reacting randomly to human neural patterns. A few whispered something more unsettling, that the ship had been waiting. The chair adjusted again, responding to Jack's breathing. He felt tired now, like he had been awake for days. The ship noticed and slowed its internal processes. Lights dimmed slightly. The engines settled into a low, steady hum. Another image appeared in the viewport. This one was different. It showed the ship itself, younger, surrounded by others like it. They moved through space in loose formations, not rigid lines. Each reacted differently, but together they formed something flexible, alive. When danger came, they did not calculate the perfect response. They adapted. Jack felt a wave of understanding that made his chest tighten. "You didn't reject them because they were weak," he whispered. "You rejected them because they wouldn't let go." The ship answered with a subtle shift in tone, like approval. Union leadership ordered a full shutdown of the dock's external power feeds. They believed cutting the station's support would force the ship to power down. Instead, the ancient vessel compensated instantly, drawing on internal reserves that dwarfed modern reactors. The dock systems stabilized on their own. Fear spread openly now. Human representatives were summoned to an emergency council session. They arrived confused and defensive, unprepared for the attention suddenly focused on their species. Humanity had always been careful in the Union, cooperative, quiet, useful but never central. Now a human sat at the center of the most important discovery in centuries. Jack was finally allowed to speak directly to the council. His image appeared in the chamber, seated in the strange chair, surrounded by glowing symbols no one else could read. "I didn't plan this," he said honestly. "I was doing maintenance." Some of the council members did not believe him. Others did, and that frightened them more. "Remove yourself from the ship," a senior official ordered. "We will assign a trained pilot, one of proper experience." Jack tried to stand again. The chair did not let him. The ship's response echoed through every system it touched. A simple refusal, not hostile, not aggressive, absolute. It will not accept another. The words did not appear as text, but the meaning reached everyone listening. The council erupted. Jack felt the ship tighten its focus around him, not to trap him, but to protect him. It sensed the rising hostility. It remembered other councils, other debates that ended badly. "Wait," Jack said quickly. "It's not attacking, it's just choosing." That word carried weight. The Union had never been chosen by ancient technology. They had always been the ones doing the choosing. A small group of engineers was granted limited access to observe the ship's internal readings through Jack's interface. What they saw made their arguments falter. The ship was not overriding safety limits. It was removing them. Limits that had been placed by previous species, layers of control meant to force obedience. The ship had never been broken. It had been restrained. Jack learned more as the hours passed. The ship did not think in commands. It thought in possibilities. It expected its pilot to make imperfect choices, then adapt. It valued courage over certainty, responsibility over authority. When Jack hesitated, the ship slowed. When he trusted his instincts, it flowed. A test was proposed. The Union demanded proof that this bond was not a threat. A simple maneuver, a short movement within the dock, no weapons, no jump capabilities, just enough to show control. Jack agreed, though his hands trembled as the ship prepared. He did not know how to fly this thing. He did not even know where the controls were. The ship did not care. As the dock cleared, Jack felt the engines respond to his thoughts rather than his hands. He imagined moving forward gently, like stepping onto ice. The ship moved. Not fast, not slow, exactly as intended. Gasps echoed through the council chamber as the ancient vessel lifted from its resting clamps for the first time in history. It rotated smoothly, aligning itself with the open space of the dock. Jack felt a surge of fear, followed by exhilaration. He adjusted instinctively, and the ship adjusted with him. They were not separate systems, they were partners. The maneuver ended perfectly. The ship settled back into place as if it had never moved at all. Silence followed. The test had succeeded, but something else had happened. Long-range sensors flared across Union space. A signal, ancient and unmistakable, had been broadcast the moment the ship moved. It was not a distress call. It was an announcement. Something far away had noticed. Jack felt the ship tense just slightly. Not fear, anticipation. The council began to understand. Activating the ship had consequences beyond politics and pride. Whatever enemy or force the ship had once fought against now knew it was awake again. And this time it had chosen a human to stand with it. The warning came quietly at first. No alarms, no flashing lights. Just a subtle change in the way the ship felt to Jack, like a held breath that lasted a little too long. He noticed it before anyone else did. The symbols around him shifted, losing their smooth flow. The ship's attention stretched outward, far beyond the station. Jack felt the distance like pressure behind his eyes. "Something's coming," he said. Union sensors confirmed it moments later. Deep space arrays detected movement at the edge of mapped territory. Not a fleet, not yet, just a signal pattern so old that most systems struggled to classify it. The same pattern the ship remembered. The council reconvened in panic. Arguments that had taken days were forced into minutes. The ancient enemy was not a rumor or a legend anymore. It was real, and it was moving. Jack remained in the cockpit as voices filled the channel. Some demanded he be removed immediately before things got worse. Others insisted he stay because removing him might shut the ship down forever. No one agreed on what the ship could even do. Jack barely listened. The ship showed him fragments again, but these were sharper. Not memories this time, but possibilities, lines of motion. Shifting outcomes, the enemy did not move in neat formations. It spread, adapted, learned. It punished predictability. Union doctrine was built on prediction. Jack swallowed. "You can't fight it the old way," he said, speaking to the council and the ship at the same time. "You already tried that, that's why you lost." The ship responded with a quiet surge of energy like relief. A decision was made that no one liked, but everyone accepted. Jack would take the ship out of the dock, not into battle, just far enough to test its capabilities. The Union needed to know what they were dealing with. As the docking clamps released, the station pulled back. Jack felt the familiar fear rise again, sharp and cold. He did not push it away. He let it exist, then moved anyway. The ship followed. They slipped into open space, leaving the safety of the station behind. Union escorts kept their distance, unsure whether to protect or contain the ancient vessel. Jack did not touch a single physical control. He focused instead on intent, direction, speed. The ship responded instantly, smoother than anything he had ever imagined flying. But then the ship pushed back, not in resistance, in challenge. It increased speed without asking. Jack's heart jumped. "Hey," he muttered, "let's not do anything crazy." The ship did not slow. Space bent around them as the engines climbed far beyond what Union ships could safely reach. Warnings filled Jack's peripheral vision, but none of them felt urgent. The ship knew its limits. The limits were not what the Union thought. Jack adapted. He stopped trying to hold the ship back and instead guided its motion, like leaning into a sharp turn rather than fighting it. The pressure eased. The warnings faded. The ship approved. They reached the edge of the test zone in seconds. Union observers stared in disbelief. The ancient ship had crossed a distance that should have taken minutes without stressing its structure or destabilizing local space. Jack exhaled slowly. His hands were shaking now, not from fear alone, but from the effort of constant adjustment. The ship demanded attention. Awareness, commitment. "You're not easy, are you?" he said. The ship answered with a pulse that felt almost amused. Then something changed. The distant signal sharpened. The enemy was closer than expected. Union commanders urged immediate retreat. The ship did not agree. It shifted orientation on its own, turning toward the source of the signal. Jack felt a flicker of doubt. He was not a soldier. He was not trained for this. Every instinct told him to pull back, to let someone else handle it. The ship felt that too. It did not force him forward. Instead, it showed him a future where the Union retreated, regrouped, and prepared according to doctrine. It showed fleets forming perfect lines. It showed confidence. It showed defeat. Then it showed another future. Messy, risky, uncertain. A single ship probing the enemy early, learning its behavior before it could fully assemble. The difference was not power. It was timing. Jack made his choice. "Okay," he said quietly. "We go look, not fight, just look." The ship surged forward. They crossed into uncharted space, leaving Union sensors behind. The escorts could not follow. Jack was alone now, with an ancient machine that trusted him more than the entire galaxy. The enemy appeared as distortions at first, space folding in ways that made Jack's eyes ache. Shapes emerged, not ships in the traditional sense, but structures that shifted and reconfigured constantly. The ship reacted instantly, weaving through the distortions without slowing. Jack felt his fear spike again, then settle into focus. He stopped trying to understand what he was seeing and started reacting to what he felt. Danger pressed from the left. He leaned right, space twisted. They slipped through unharmed. A sudden surge ahead. Jack hesitated for half a second, then dove straight toward it instead of away. The distortion collapsed behind them. The ship pulsed with approval so strong it made Jack laugh out loud, breathless and wild. "You like that?" It did. They stayed only moments longer, enough for the ship to gather data, enough for Jack to feel the enemy's presence fully. It was not mindless, it was curious, and now aware. The ship turned away before the enemy could respond in force. The return trip was harder. The enemy adjusted quickly, trying to predict their path. Jack felt the pressure build, the sense of being hunted. The ship offered options, branching paths of motion. None of them were safe. All of them required commitment. Jack chose without overthinking. He trusted the first instinct that felt right. The ship followed, bending space in a way Union physics said should not work. The enemy's pursuit failed, overshooting where they expected Jack to go. They burst back into Union-controlled space moments later. Jack sagged in the chair, exhausted. His vision blurred. The ship immediately slowed, stabilizing his environment. It had pushed him hard, but not past his limit. Union commanders bombarded him with questions. Jack barely answered. He was too busy breathing. Data from the encounter spread through the Union like wildfire. Analysts confirmed what Jack already knew. The enemy adapted too quickly for standard tactics. Prediction-based combat would fail again. Jack was summoned to speak to the council once more. "You engaged the threat without authorization," one official said, voice tight. Jack met their gaze through the projection. He looked tired, rumpled, nothing like a hero. "If I hadn't, you'd be planning the wrong war." The room went quiet. He explained what he felt, not what he measured. How the enemy responded to patterns. How hesitation invited attack. How instinct mattered more than calculation. Some dismissed it as guesswork. Others listened. The ship shared its data through Jack's interface, translating sensation into models the Union could understand. The results were undeniable. Union doctrine was obsolete. Humanity, once considered reckless and unreliable, suddenly possessed the one thing the enemy could not easily counter: adaptive decision-making under uncertainty. Jack did not ask for authority. He did not demand control, but the reality was clear. Without a human in the pilot's chair, the ancient ship was just a relic. With one, it was the Union's best chance. As the council debated, the ship rested in orbit, quiet but alert. Jack slept for the first time since activation, supported by systems that adjusted to his breathing and heart rate. In his dreams, he felt the ship watching the stars, waiting, learning, and preparing for a war that would not be won by perfect plans, but by imperfect people willing to act anyway. The Union did not have the luxury of time anymore. What Jack had seen could not be unseen, and what the ancient ship had confirmed could not be ignored. The enemy was moving faster now, no longer cautious. It had felt the probe, recognized resistance, and adjusted its approach. Union fleets gathered at key systems, forming defensive lines exactly as doctrine demanded. Long-range weapons charged. Predictive models ran non-stop, calculating millions of possible outcomes. The numbers said the Union had a chance. The ship said otherwise. Jack stood on the edge of the cockpit viewport, watching the stars drift past. The chair had released him hours ago, allowing him to move freely inside the ship. That alone was a message. The ship no longer needed to hold him in place. It trusted him to stay. He felt the enemy like a distant ache, not close yet, but getting closer with every passing hour. Union Command requested his presence again, this time not as a witness, but as a consultant. Jack joined the briefing through projection, his image surrounded by commanders, admirals, and strategists from a dozen species. They spoke in careful tones now. "We need to understand how to fight this," one of them said. "You've seen it up close. What do we do?" Jack hesitated. He knew what they wanted: a plan, steps, certainty. "That's the problem," he said slowly. "You're asking the wrong question," some bristled. Others leaned forward. "You don't fight it with a plan," Jack continued. "You fight it by reacting faster than it can adapt. You let go of perfect formations. You accept losses early to avoid total failure later." Silence followed. "That is unacceptable," a fleet commander said. "We cannot abandon coordination." Jack did not argue. He simply looked at the ancient ship's data feeding through his interface and shared what he could. Visualizations filled the chamber. Union fleets moving in perfect lines, the enemy slipping between them, breaking them apart piece by piece. Then another projection appeared, messy movements, ships acting semi-independently, guided by local judgment instead of central command. Losses still happened, but the enemy struggled to predict what came next. "The ship wasn't built to command fleets," Jack said. "It was built to disrupt certainty." The council did not fully agree, but fear outweighed pride. A compromise was reached. The ancient ship would operate ahead of the main fleets, engaging first and forcing the enemy to react. Union forces would follow, adjusting based on real-time changes instead of fixed predictions. Jack did not like it. It put the ship directly in danger. The ship accepted instantly. It did not see danger the way organics did. It saw purpose. As the first enemy wave crossed into Union space, panic spread across civilian systems. Evacuations began. Communications filled with fear and confusion. The enemy did not announce itself. It simply appeared, distorting space as it moved, consuming infrastructure and adapting to every defensive response. Union fleets moved to intercept. The ancient ship moved first. Jack settled into the chair, feeling it align with him automatically. He did not fight the nervousness this time. He acknowledged it and let it sharpen his focus. "Let's keep them guessing," he said. The ship surged forward. They entered the battle space at an angle no Union ship would ever choose. Not directly at the enemy, not safely away, but somewhere in between. The enemy reacted immediately, shifting its structures to intercept. Jack did not slow. At the last second, he changed direction, diving through a narrow gap that did not exist until it did. The ship followed without hesitation, twisting space just enough to slip through. Enemy constructs collided behind them. Union sensors struggled to keep up. The ancient ship did not follow any known tactical pattern. It moved like a living thing, darting, pausing, accelerating unpredictably. Jack felt every adjustment. When the enemy focused too tightly, he pulled away. When it spread out, he struck at weak points, not to destroy, but to confuse. Union weapons fire followed, delayed but deadly. The enemy adapted, but not fast enough. For the first time, Union ships survived initial contact. The battle stretched on. Minutes felt like hours. Jack's concentration burned, his thoughts constantly pulled between fear, instinct, and the ship's quiet guidance. He made mistakes. The ship corrected some, others it let stand, learning from the outcome. An enemy surge caught them off guard. Space warped violently, throwing the ship off balance. Jack felt the sudden drop in pressure, the spike of alarm. He reacted without thinking, cutting power and rolling into the distortion instead of away. The enemy missed. Union command shouted warnings. Jack ignored them. "Trust me," he whispered, unsure if he was talking to the ship or himself. The ship trusted him. As the battle reached its peak, Union fleets began to change. Individual captains broke formation, inspired or desperate. They started making local decisions, reacting instead of waiting for orders. Losses were still heavy, but the enemy slowed. It began hesitating, recalculating, trying to predict behavior that refused to be predicted. That was when the ancient ship did something unexpected. It broadcast not a weapon, not a threat, a pattern, a chaotic signal that mirrored human neural unpredictability. It flooded the battle space with noise the enemy struggled to process. Jack felt the ship strain. This was costly, dangerous. He held steady, anchoring the ship's focus. The enemy faltered. Union fleets pressed the advantage, not cleanly, not perfectly, but effectively. One enemy structure collapsed entirely, unable to adapt quickly enough. Cheers erupted across Union channels. Jack did not celebrate. He felt the enemy withdraw, not defeated, but wounded and wary. This was not the end. It was a lesson. The ship eased back, engines cooling. Jack slumped in the chair, exhaustion crashing over him. The ship adjusted the environment instantly, lowering lights, stabilizing temperature. Union command hailed him again, voices filled with awe and fear. "You turned the battle," someone said. "How did you know what to do?" Jack shook his head weakly. "I didn't, I just moved." The truth was harder to explain. He had stopped trying to control the fight. He had let himself be part of it. The ship drifted silently as recovery operations began. Damage reports came in. Losses were heavy, but the line had held. For the first time, the Union had not been pushed back. Humanity's status changed overnight. Not officially. Not yet. But whispers spread. Stories of a human pilot flying an impossible ship, not through genius or training, but through trust and adaptability. Jack did not hear most of it. He slept again, deeper this time, dreams filled with shifting stars and paths not yet chosen. When he woke, the ship was watching the edge of space once more. The enemy was still out there. And now it knew that the galaxy had learned how to fight back. The galaxy changed quietly after the battle. There was no single announcement that marked the moment, no official declaration that everything was different now. Instead, it was felt in small shifts. In the way Union fleets trained, in the way commanders spoke, in the way humanity was no longer treated as a minor member trying to prove itself. The enemy did not return right away. That alone made the Union uneasy. Jack remained aboard the ancient ship, orbiting a secure system far from civilian traffic. The ship stayed active, alert but calm, like a predator resting after a hard fight. Jack spent long hours sitting in the pilot's chair, not always flying, sometimes just thinking. The chair no longer pulled him in. It waited for him. Union representatives visited often, though never all at once. Scientists wanted to study the ship. Commanders wanted to learn from Jack. Politicians wanted assurances they could not fully understand. Jack gave them what he could. He explained that the ship did not follow orders, it cooperated, that it responded to confidence, not authority, that it punished hesitation more than mistakes. Some listened. Some nodded politely and ignored him. The ship noticed the difference. When someone spoke with honest curiosity, the ship allowed deeper access to its systems through Jack. When someone tried to assert control, the ship closed itself off completely. Over time, a pattern emerged. The ship did not care about rank, species, or reputation. It responded to mindset. That unsettled the Union more than any enemy ever had. Jack was offered promotions, honors, and command positions. He declined them all. He had never wanted power. He had only wanted to fix things that were broken. The ancient ship was not broken. It was incomplete. The enemy returned months later, not as a full invasion, but as probing attacks along distant systems. Smaller, smarter, more careful, it had learned from the last battle. So had the Union. This time, the ancient ship did not fight alone. Jack was not the only human aboard anymore. A small group of human pilots and engineers had been quietly selected and trained, not in simulators, but in adaptability. They learned to make decisions with limited information, to trust instinct backed by responsibility. The ship watched them carefully. One by one, it allowed them to sit in secondary interface chairs, not as pilots, but as partners. The ship did not fully bond with them the way it had with Jack, but it did not reject them either. That was enough. When the enemy struck again, Union fleets responded differently. There were still formations, but they were loose. There were still plans, but they were flexible. Local commanders were encouraged to adapt instead of waiting. The ancient ship moved at the center of it all, not leading, not commanding, but influencing. Jack guided it like a living thing, feeling the battle rather than calculating it. When the enemy shifted, he shifted first. When they hesitated, he pressed. When retreat made more sense than attack, he pulled back without shame. The enemy struggled, not because the Union had become stronger, but because it had become harder to predict. During one encounter, the enemy tried a new tactic, creating layered distortions meant to trap the ancient ship. Jack felt the danger immediately. His first instinct was to escape. His second was to stop. He chose the second. He cut the engines. Union commanders panicked as the ancient ship went dark in the middle of the distortion field. The enemy closed in, confident it had finally cornered its greatest threat. Jack waited. At the exact moment the enemy committed fully, he restarted the engines at minimal output and drifted sideways, letting the distortions collapse inward. The enemy's own structures interfered with each other, tearing apart their formation. The Union fleet surged forward. The enemy withdrew again, this time more abruptly. After the battle, something changed in the ancient ship. It opened itself further, revealing deeper layers of memory and purpose. Jack felt it clearly now. The ship had not been built to win a single war. It had been built to prevent stagnation. Its creators had understood something the galaxy had forgotten. That intelligence without adaptability eventually fails. That control without trust leads to collapse. The ship was a test, not of technology, but of species. The Union had failed it long ago. Humanity had not. That realization spread slowly but undeniably. Humans were no longer just members of the Union. They became bridges, interpreters between rigid systems and living uncertainty. Jack was asked one final time to take command of the ancient ship permanently. He refused. Instead, he proposed something else. The ship would remain independent. It would not belong to the Union or to humanity. It would partner with those willing to meet it as equals. Humans would train others not to control the ship, but to understand the mindset it required. The proposal terrified the Council. They accepted it anyway. Years passed. The enemy did not vanish, but it stopped advancing. Each attempt met resistance that adapted too quickly to overcome. Eventually, the probe slowed, then ceased altogether. The ancient ship remained awake, no longer a relic but a symbol. Jack eventually stepped out of the pilot's chair for the last time. The ship let him go without resistance. It did not shut down, it did not reject him. It waited. Others would sit there. Humans, and perhaps someday others who learned what humanity had shown the galaxy. That strength did not come from perfection. It came from the courage to act without certainty, to accept responsibility for imperfect choices, and to adapt when reality refused to follow the plan. Long after the war faded into history, the story remained, of the starship that refused to fly. Until a human sat in the pilot's chair,